So I do a lot of strange things in my life. It's just one of those things, being where I am right now, including sometimes getting on a plane and flying to countries like Abu Dhabi. This is definitely strange. It is all the stranger when you fly to Abu Dhabi to be part of the world's largest conference on renewable energy. That is where strange spills over into very exciting surrealism. As you know, whatever you say when you're sitting there in Abu Dhabi, you're standing on this vast pool of oil, most of which should never see the light of day if we are to avoid the phenomenon of runaway climate change. I was last out there in November last year for this exhibition. It was astonishing, and the only reason I mention that is I heard for the first time there the chief executive of one of the largest solar manufacturing companies in the world, a Chinese company called Suntech. And Suntech basically said, you can all relax. We've come a bit late to this party, but we know it's a pretty important party. This is the solar party. It's the party that is going to substitute solar energy, real-time solar energy, incoming today, rather than stored solar energy, fossil fuels. You can relax now because we've got there, and guess what? This is relatively easy. We can bring to your countries, to the marketplace, photovoltaic cells, these arrays of photovoltaic equipment, converting sunlight directly into electricity. We can do that, and we can do it at what will be grid parity, which means the same price as you pay for electricity from any other source, within the next 2 to 3 years. But actually, you shouldn't really worry about that, because we all know we can do that, as long as politicians don't get in the way, and as long as the big energy companies don't get in the way. We can do that all over the world. What really excites us is not grid parity, but when we get to the point where we can sell a unit of electricity at half the price of electricity today, from coal, gas, nuclear, disappearing at the end of our meeting this morning to head off to Hinkley Point to join the demonstrators around Hinkley Point to just, do the bit that we have to do still about the insanity of nuclear power. And this guy was amazing. He was so modest. He just sat there and he sort of, with an interpreter, didn't think this was a particularly big deal, just said, why are you all in such a state about this? We can get to half grid parity within about the next 10 years. No problem. No technical problem. Laws of thermodynamics don't get in our way. The only thing that happens is the laws of the politicians that get in our way. And I came away with that. And I had a chance to talk to him about that. And I said, this is kind of revolutionary. If people really wanted to be reassured about this, they could take this information and turn it into something which would allow us to build a vision of a different world where every person on this world, on this planet, could use energy to liberate themselves as we've used energy to liberate ourselves. Because if energy doesn't have that liberatory role, then we know we're not going to be living in a sustainable world. So I only mention that because every single bit of this agenda that I look at, on waste management, on transport systems, on farming, on particularly smart materials and metals and better use of metals in a closed-loop economy, I just look at this and I see the surge of innovation that is going on at the moment. And that makes me pretty hopeful that actually some of this stuff is going to make a scaled difference in a fast enough period of time. And then I get sent a very weighty academic paper from my colleagues at the University of Surrey telling me that none of this technology is really going to make a big enough difference because people don't know how to gear their lifestyle to these new super efficient technologies becoming available to us. So a long time ago, I came to the conclusion that the only way to achieve a different debate about growth was to think about it very differently, more from a values perspective, more from the perspective about what it is that human beings are trying to achieve in their own lives on this planet and collectively as a species. To think about it much more from a spiritual perspective, where the growth that really matters is the growth in our understanding, in our insights, in our ability to celebrate this extraordinary planet that we are such an important part of. Not a no-growth approach, if you like, but growth of a different kind, growth that doesn't entail the destruction of the Earth's natural capital. All of that means reinventing the words that we take for granted. I have a little truth test in my mind when I hear politicians use the word wealth. It really worries me, because in 99.9 times out of 100 where they use the word wealth, they basically mean money. They don't really mean wealth as the word ought to mean today. They don't actually mean that deeper sense of wellness and well-being. All words derived, incidentally, from the Old English, Anglo-Saxon word wealth without the A in it, which simply meant wellness. Politicians never use the word wealth in that context. When they talk about sustainability, they tend to mean sustainability of today's business model. This was an abuse of the English language most effectively carried out by Gordon Brown. He would allow people to think that he was really into sustainability, but what he really meant was keeping the growth model sustainable. When we talk about different patterns of capitalism, we don't really challenge the capital that we're talking about. We still haven't got a proper deep understanding of natural capital, for instance. So our language is prejudicial to the need to move people into different states of mind. The language works against what we ought to be doing. It reinforces dangerously illusory mindsets rather than opens up a different way of doing things. So just to conclude on this before we get into some discussion here, it does seem to me that one of our tasks as activists passionate about the earth, passionate about creation, passionate about the role of us as servants of that creation, one of the things we have to do is challenge language all the time. Never let people get away with statements about growth and wealth and competition and all of these things, progress, without saying, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Where do you derive your understanding of what those words and concepts mean? And that's sort of quite, that sends a little reminder to you that we've got power here in these ideas. We've got opportunities to inspire people differently, to bring them to a place of service and celebration that is different from the ways in which they think about those things in their normal lives. So I don't want to talk this down. My feeling right now is that we're at the point where these ideas which have been maturing, let's use that little euphemism, for the best part of 40, 50 years, and some of course would take it back even further than that, now have a chance to make a difference in people's lives that they haven't done for a very long time. And I think that's where our responsibilities, the service that we can offer, comes into play. So I'm going to leave it there, Paul, and just pick that up with the discussion with my colleagues here and all of you. So thank you for having me here today.